What if the phrase, my kingdom is not of this world, wasn't just like a poetic metaphor for a spiritual heaven?
Right.
What if it was actually a 2,000-year-old reference to 11-dimensional theoretical
It's
physics?
a wild thought, yeah.
Today, we are tearing down the wall between ancient theology and quantum mechanics. We want to see if the miracles of Jesus weren't magic,
Okay.
but higher dimensional physics. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Usually when we think about the towering, incense-filled cathedrals of ancient religion, and then like the pristine, sterile laboratories of modern quantum physics, we put them in two completely separate buckets.
Oh, absolutely.
They just feel like completely different universes with completely different vocabularies, right?
Yeah, it is the ultimate historical divide. I mean, we are culturally conditioned to treat the spiritual realm as this mystical, untouched, almost hazy thing.
Right, like something that requires blind faith.
Exactly. While the physical realm is treated as measurable, predictable, entirely governed by the strict, cold laws of thermodynamics, we treat them like oil and water.
But what if that separation is entirely artificial? I mean, what if the language of modern cutting-edge physics is actually giving us a brand new vocabulary?
A vocabulary to understand the very things ancient people could only describe as miracles.
Yeah, exactly. So today we are exploring a mind-bending framework. We're going to take concepts like the block universe, string theory, and panpsychism.
Some really light reading.
Oh, totally. Just
Yeah.
casual stuff. And we're going to ask if they can actually explain how a figure like Jesus could manipulate reality and speak of other realms.
Which is an incredibly ambitious synthesis.
And even more profoundly, we're going to look at how deeply human concepts like love, sin, and suffering might actually translate into the literal mathematical laws of cosmic physics.
We are essentially attempting to bridge a gap that has existed since the Enlightenment. We're looking at whether our most advanced, mathematically rigorous scientific theories can provide an actual structural framework for ancient claims.
Claims that, up until now, either had to be swallowed entirely on blind faith or just, dismissed entirely as ancient superstition.
Right. We are going to look at the literal architecture of reality itself.
So before we can understand how reality was allegedly manipulated by Jesus, we first need to establish where these events are even taking place.
Yeah, that is the necessary starting point.
Mm-hmm.
We have to define the environment, the spatial parameters of reality, before we can even discuss the phenomena occurring within it.
And that starts with that very famous, very cryptic claim made by Jesus. My kingdom is not of this world.
Mm-hmm.
For 2,000 years, people have usually interpreted this through a purely theological lens. It's almost always seen as a reference to a transcendent spiritual reality.
A place entirely beyond our material existence.
Right, like a heaven that is floating out there in the ether, completely divorced from the dirt and the gravity of Earth.
Yes, the traditional view relies heavily on a dualistic cosmology. It separates this world, meaning the material, flawed, tangible, three-dimensional Earth, from the kingdom.
Which is like immaterial and perfect.
Exactly, a purely spiritual state. But when we hear the phrase not of this world today, a modern scientific mind doesn't necessarily jump to a spiritual ether.
No, they might actually think of theoretical physics. Specifically, models that propose there is literally, mathematically, more to reality than our standard 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time.
And this is where we get into some of the most complex theories in modern cosmology.
Theories that suggest that what we perceive every single day, up, down, left, right, forward, and backward, is just a tiny, incredibly limited slice of a much larger geometric reality.
It's a fraction of the whole picture.
So let's talk about string theory, because when you read about it, it sounds like pure science fiction, but this is the bleeding edge of theoretical physics.
It is. And it is born out of a profound mathematical necessity, not just, philosophical daydreaming.
Right.
To understand why physicists even started talking about higher dimensions, you have to look at the biggest problem in physics, the incompatibility of our two best theories.
Okay, so break that down for us. What are the two theories?
On one hand, you have general relativity, which brilliantly explains gravity and the massive things in the universe, stars, galaxies, planets,
The big stuff.
the really big stuff. On the other hand, you have quantum mechanics, which perfectly explains the subatomic world, quarks, electrons, photons.
So the really, really small stuff.
Exactly. Both theories are incredibly accurate in their own domains, but if you try to combine them to understand something that is both incredibly massive and incredibly small, like the center of a black hole or the moment of the Big Bang, the math completely breaks down.
It just doesn't work.
No, it produces infinite probabilities, which basically means the equations stop working. They spit out nonsense.
It's like trying to run Mac software on a Windows computer. The foundational coding languages of the universe just refuse to talk to each other.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
So physicists spent decades trying to formulate a unified theory, a theory of everything.
And that is where string theory comes in.
Yes, it suggests that if you zoom in close enough on a subatomic particle, it isn't a solid dot. It is a tiny vibrating loop of energy, a string.
Okay.
And the way that string vibrates determines what kind of particle it becomes, much like the way a vibrating violin string produces different musical notes.
Wow. Okay. That's a beautiful image. But here is the catch, right? The mathematics that allow these strings to vibrate in a way that successfully unifies gravity and quantum mechanics, they simply do not work in 3 dimensions of space.
Right. They mathematically fail in 3D.
They need more room to vibrate.
Precisely. For the equations of string theory to hold together without collapsing into mathematical anomalies, the universe must have 10 or even 11 dimensions.
Okay, but, and I know you're anticipating this, if there are 11 dimensions, why on earth can't we see them?
It's the obvious question.
Right. If I look around the room right now, I only see 3 physical dimensions. Where are the other 8 hiding?
Physicists theorize that while the 3 spatial dimensions we experience expanded infinitely during the Big Bang, the extra dimensions remained incredibly tiny.
Tiny. Like how tiny?
Subatomic. They are curled up into complex microscopic shapes, often called Calabi-Yau manifolds, at every single point in space.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize that.
Think of it like looking at a power line from an airplane. From 10,000 feet up, the power line looks like a purely one-dimensional line. It only has length.
Right.
But if you were a microscopic ant crawling on that power line, you realize it is actually a 3-dimensional cylinder. You can walk along its length, but you can also walk around its circumference.
Oh, wow. So the dimension is there. It is just too small for the macro observer to perceive.
Exactly. It's curled up.
And then the field evolved even further into M theory, right? Which proposes these higher dimensional brains, short for membranes.
Yes, M theory expanded the math significantly.
And these brains could be massive. They could house entire parallel universes existing literally millimeters away from ours in a higher dimensional space, but we would be completely oblivious to them.
Because we are confined to our 3-dimensional slice.
Yeah.
That is the spatial architecture M theory provides. It suggests our entire universe might be just one single sheet of paper in a vast higher dimensional book.
So let's take that rigorous physics framework and apply it back to that ancient text. My kingdom is not of this world does not have to mean a magical kingdom sitting on a fluffy cloud.
No, not at all.
It could theoretically describe a higher dimensional brain overlapping ours. There is a classic thought experiment that I think perfectly visualizes what this interaction would look like. Have you heard of Flatland?
Oh yeah, Edwin A. Abbot's novella from the 19th century?
Exactly. So imagine a completely flat, 2-dimensional world, just a plane like a sheet of paper stretching out infinitely, and the beings living on it are perfectly flat geometric shapes. They only know forward, backward, left, and right. They have absolutely no concept of up or down because those dimensions just do not exist in their universe.
It is a brilliant analogy. It illustrates the limits of perception beautifully.
Right. So imagine a 3-dimensional object, let's say a solid sphere, floating above this 2-dimensional world. Okay. Now imagine that 3D sphere passes straight down through their 2D flat plane. What do those 2D beings actually see?
They don't see a sphere.
No, because they physically cannot look up to see the rest of it. All they can see is the cross-section of the sphere where it intersects their plane.
Right, the exact point of intersection.
So they just see a tiny dot suddenly appear out of absolutely nowhere. Then, as the sphere continues to pass through, that dot magically grows into a small circle, then a larger circle as the widest part of the sphere hits the plane.
And then it starts to shrink again.
Exactly. The circle shrinks, turns back into a dot, and vanishes completely into thin air. To those 2D beings, a fundamental law of their physical universe has just been spectacularly broken.
Yeah, matter appeared from nothing, spontaneously changed its shape and mass, and then vanished.
It looks like an absolute, undeniable miracle. It defies every law of science they know, but to the 3D sphere, it's just passing through. It's not breaking physics, it's just operating on higher dimensional physics.
And that is precisely the conceptual bridge we are building here. If a divine realm, or this kingdom, is functionally a higher dimension, that wholly intersects with our lower dimensional reality.
Then a being from that higher dimension interacting with ours wouldn't be breaking the laws of physics.
They would just be operating on a broader, more complete set of physical laws that we literally lack the sensory apparatus and the mathematical equations to perceive.
Wow.
The miracle is just a higher physics bleeding into a lower dimension.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back on this a bit, because while the flatland analogy is incredibly elegant, aren't we taking a massive unscientific leap here?
How do you mean?
Well, the mathematicians calculating curled-up dimensions in string theory are trying to explain the mass of an electron or the behavior of quarks. They are definitely not trying to prove the existence of angels or spiritual realms.
Oh, absolutely not.
So assuming that spiritual entities literally live in the 11th dimension feels like we are turning a mathematical equation into, I don't know, a spiritual zip code.
What's fascinating here is that you are entirely right to put the brakes on. That is a crucial distinction to make. If we say the 11th dimension is heaven, we are fundamentally misunderstanding the science.
Right.
Physics does not claim these dimensions contain spiritual beings or any beings at all. As of right now, they are mathematical necessities for a unified theory, not observable habitats.
That's a sim metaphor.
Conflating mathematical geometry with spiritual realms is the philosophical leap, not a scientific consensus.
Right. I just want to make sure we aren't selling the listener a pseudoscience bill of goods where we pretend quantum physicists are actively hunting for God's living room.
We certainly aren't doing that.
Yeah.
But here is why the exercise is still incredibly profound. What these scientific models offer us is a framework of plausibility.
Plausibility, okay.
Ancient people experienced or intuited phenomena that they described as a divine realm, but they only had the limited vocabulary of ancient cosmology to describe it.
Yeah, they looked at the sky and saw the heavens above, and they looked at the dirt and saw the underworld below.
It was a strictly vertical physical layering.
Because that was the only way they could conceptualize separation.
Exactly. But modern multidimensional physics provides a new, deeply logical conceptual bridge. It gives us a mathematical and spatial vocabulary to comprehend how a reality could be entirely present, completely overlapping every single atom of our world, and yet remain utterly invisible and inaccessible to us.
Oh, wow.
It bridges the gap by showing that unseen realms influencing our world is actually a mathematically sound concept, even if the specific contents of those realms remain a matter of theology rather than physics.
It makes the architecture of the impossible suddenly plausible within our own scientific logic.
Exactly.
It gives us the geometry of a miracle. But here's the thing, that only solves the problem of space.
Right. Space is only half the equation.
Exactly. If higher dimensions give us the spatial architecture of this kingdom, how do we explain the temporal aspect? Yeah, time. Because a massive part of the claims about Jesus and the concept of God in general is about time. You have a being who claims to be the Alpha and the Omega, existing before the world began, knowing the future before it happens.
Omniscience.
Right. How can a being be everywhere and know everything across all of time? To understand that, we have to move our discussion from the geometry of space to the geometry of time.
And to do that, we have to fundamentally dismantle how you, me, and everyone else listening experiences time on a daily basis.
Dismantle it.
Yes.
Oh.
Human consciousness experiences time as a flowing river. We believe there is a rigid, concrete past that is dead and gone, a fleeting, razor-thin present moment that we call now, and a completely unwritten open future.
Sure, that's just common sense.
But from the perspective of modern physics, that intuitive experience of time is practically an illusion. To explain our missions, we have to look at a concept known as the block universe.
In the block universe, which sounds incredibly static. How does modern physics arrive at the conclusion that the flowing river of time is an illusion?
It all stems from Albert Einstein and his special theory of relativity.
Okay.
Before Einstein, scientists believed exactly what we intuitively feel, that time is an absolute universal ticking clock. A second on Earth is exactly the same as a second on the other side of the galaxy.
Right, second is a second.
But Einstein realized something profound about the speed of light. He realized that the speed of light is the absolute speed limit of the universe, and it is constant for all observers, no matter how fast they are moving.
Right, so if I am shining a flashlight while standing still, the light travels at light speed.
Yes.
And if I'm flying in a rocket at half the speed of light and turn on a flashlight, the light still leaves my ship at the exact same speed of light relative to me. The speed doesn't compound.
Precisely. But mathematically, speed is just distance divided by time. So if the speed of light must remain absolute and constant for everyone, something else has to bend to make the math work.
Oh, so if speed is fixed, time and distance have to change.
That something else is space and time. Einstein proved time dilation. He showed mathematically that the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time relative to a stationary observer.
That is just so wild to think about.
If you fly away in a spaceship at near light speed for what feels to you like 1 year, you might return to Earth to find that 50 years have passed for everyone else.
Which has literally been proven, right? With atomic clocks on airplanes and satellites. Like, the GPS on our phones only works because it constantly adjusts for the time dilation of the satellites orbiting the Earth.
Exactly. It is a proven physical reality, not just a theory. But the philosophical implication of time dilation is staggering.
How so?
If time moves differently depending on your speed and gravity, it means there's no such thing as a universal now. My now could be your future or someone else's past, depending entirely on our relative velocities and positions in space.
Wait,
Yes. Because of this, physicists cannot treat time as a separate flowing thing. They have to treat space and time as a single interwoven fabric, a four-dimensional continuum called spacetime.
and this is where the block universe comes in.
Yes. Because if every moment in time is entirely relative, the only mathematically consistent way to map the universe is to conceptualize all of spacetime as a single, unchanging, four-dimensional block.
A block.
In the block universe model, the Big Bang, the moment the pyramids were built, the moment you were listening to this sentence, and the ultimate heat death of the universe, they all exist simultaneously.
Mind blown.
They're all equally real, just located at different coordinates within the block.
Okay, my mind is slightly blown here, but let me try an analogy to make sure we are really grasping this. Let's think of it like a strip of movie film.
Okay, I like that.
We humans, in our day-to-day lives, are stuck inside the mechanics of the film projector. We are characters in the movie experiencing the story exactly one single frame at a time, illuminated by the light of the projector, which we call the present moment.
All right, frame by frame.
So from inside the projector, we are convinced that the previous frames have been destroyed and the next frames haven't been printed yet.
Because that's all we can see.
Exactly. But if you step outside the projector room, if you step entirely outside the mechanism of time, you can hold the entire completed reel of film in your hands. You can look at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the movie, and they all exist at the exact same moment in your hands.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Yes. To someone holding the reel, the climax of the movie isn't waiting to happen. It already exists, just further down the strip of celluloid.
Right.
In the block universe model, the year 1000 BCE and the year 4000 CE are sitting right there in the block, just as concretely as the room you are sitting in right now.
So let's tie this back to our deep dives mission. The theological link here is absolutely staggering.
It really is.
Because if God, or a divine reality, exists outside of space-time, outside the block universe, then we have a perfect scientifically parallel explanation for omnipresence and omniscience.
Exactly. A being outside the block holds the film reel. They don't have to wait for the future to happen to know what it is. They can simply look at the end of the reel.
This fundamentally reframes how we view prophetic knowledge, predestination, or claims of eternity in these ancient texts. When Jesus says things like, "Before Abraham was, I am," or when he predicts future events with absolute certainty, he is not performing parlor tricks.
No, he isn't a psychic guessing probabilities.
Right. If he represents this outside entity stepping into the film reel into our dimensional space, his ability to know the future is simply the natural perspective of a higher dimensional observer interacting with a lower dimensional system.
It's like the character inside the projector suddenly remembering what it was like to hold the whole reel. Gives literal physical mechanics to the concept of eternity.
Yeah, because I think most people imagine eternity as just a really, really long time. Billions and billions of years stretching on forever.
But this model suggests that eternity isn't infinite time at all. Eternity is the complete absence of time. It is all time, experienced simultaneously in an eternal present.
Which perfectly aligns with the classical philosophical definitions of God put forward by thinkers like Thomas Aquinas centuries ago.
Yes, they argued God must be outside of time to be unchangeable. What modern physics has done is provide the exact cosmological geometry, the block universe, to show exactly how that timelessness functions relative to our linear experience.
From outside the block, you have immediate simultaneous access to every coordinate within it.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've built the universe. We have the spatial dimensions like string theory in brains, where other realms can mathematically overlap ours. And we have the block universe, where all of time exists at once, explaining how a being can be omniscient.
We have the architecture.
Right, we have the architecture.
Yeah.
But here's the massive question. How does someone actually bend it?
The mechanics.
Yeah, because Jesus wasn't just sitting back observing the film reel. He was allegedly changing the frames. He was turning water into wine, walking on water, healing the sick. He was performing miracles.
Yes.
We need to shift our conversation to the actual mechanics of these miracles. How does an entity alter the seemingly fixed laws of physics?
To explore that, we have to look at the microscopic foundations of reality, specifically quantum physics and the role of consciousness.
Okay, let's get into it.
This brings us to perhaps the most fiercely debated and baffling phenomenon in modern science, the quantum observer effect.
The observer effect.
Yes. To understand how reality might be altered, we have to understand what reality actually is at its most fundamental microscopic level. And quantum mechanics tells us that reality is deeply, deeply weird.
So weird. Let's break down the observer effect because it completely shatters our everyday intuition. When we throw a baseball, we know exactly where it is and where it's going. It's a solid object moving through space.
Right. Classical mechanics.
But at the quantum level, when we are looking at electrons or photons, particles don't behave like baseballs.
Yeah.
They behave according to the results of something called the double slit experiment.
The double slit experiment is the key to all of this. In incredibly simplified terms, physicists fire single subatomic particles, like photons of light, at a barrier that has two tiny slits in it.
Okay.
There is a screen behind the barrier to record where the particles hit. When physicists do not observe or measure the particles as they pass through the slits, the particles act like a wave.
A wave, like a ripple in water.
Exactly. They pass through both slits simultaneously, interfere with themselves, and create a wave-like interference pattern on the back screen.
Right, which implies the single particle is somehow in multiple places at once, existing purely as a wave of probable locations. It hasn't picked a location yet.
Exactly. It exists in a state of superposition, a cloud of pure potential.
Okay, I'm with you.
But here is the part that keeps physicists up at night. If the scientists place a detector at the slits to simply observe or measure which slit the particle actually goes through, the particle stops acting like a wave.
Wait, just by looking at it?
Just by measuring it. The very act of measurement collapses the wave function. The particle is forced to pick a definitive state, and it acts like a solid little bullet, passing through only one slit and leaving a completely different pattern on the screen.
That is insane. The universe literally changes its behavior because it is being watched. The observation affects the reality being measured.
Yes. At the quantum level, the universe does not seem to be a fixed, deterministic machine operating independently of us. It exists in a state of mathematical probability right up until the exact moment consciousness, or a measurement apparatus, interacts with it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because in the moment you introduce the idea that observation changes reality, people naturally extrapolate that.
Well, they do.
If my observation forces the universe to pick a state, does that mean consciousness actually dictates reality? It sounds incredibly close to the spiritual idea that a powerful mind, if it just believes hard enough, could alter physical outcomes.
It does sound like that.
It reminds me directly of Jesus telling his followers that if they possess faith the size of a mustard seed, they could literally tell a mountain to move, and it would move.
And here we must introduce a rigorous scientific reality check.
Let's have it.
Because while the metaphysical implications of quantum mechanics are profound, it is very easy to fall into quantum mysticism. The observer effect occurs at the subatomic level. The wave function collapses when an electron is measured.
Right.
That does not mean that human thoughts can literally, physically reshape macroscopic reality. You cannot sit in your living room, stare intensely at a coffee mug, and levitate it with your mind, let alone move an actual geological mountain.
Yeah, I've tried. Doesn't work.
Conflating quantum measurement with human telekinesis is a gross misunderstanding of how the physics scales up to the macro world.
Right. So we aren't talking about Jedi mind tricks, and Jesus wasn't just a mutant with telekinesis. But we can't ignore that there is a fundamental link between the observer and the observed.
No, we can't ignore it at all.
And this leads us to some deeply profound philosophical theories that try to explain the relationship between mind and matter, specifically panpsychism and idealism. Can you walk us through the logic of those? Because they completely flip how we view the universe.
They absolutely do. To understand panpsychism and idealism, You first have to understand the problem they are trying to solve.
Yeah.
The hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem.
Yes. Our standard modern view of the universe is materialism. Materialism asserts that the universe is made entirely of dead, mindless matter atoms, rocks, gas.
Just stuff.
Right. And somehow, through billions of years of random evolution, a complex lump of this dead matter, your brain, suddenly woke up and generated subjective conscious experience.
Which, when you really stop and think about it, sounds kind of absurd. It's like saying if you arrange enough dead Lego bricks in exactly the right pattern, the Lego castle will suddenly start feeling anxious about its mortgage.
That's a great way to put it. How does dead matter create an internal subjective feeling?
Right, it's a huge leap.
That is the exact conundrum. Materialism struggles to explain how consciousness magically emerges from unconscious parts. So philosophers and quantum theorists are increasingly turning to alternative frameworks.
Like panpsychism.
Exactly. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is not an accidental, late-stage byproduct of matter. Instead, consciousness is a fundamental bedrock property of the universe, existing alongside mass, spin, and electrical charge.
So it's baked into the universe from the start.
Yes. It suggests even an electron has some unimaginably rudimentary spark of subjective experience.
Okay, wow. And idealism goes even further than that, right?
Idealism goes much further. Idealism suggests that reality is fundamentally mental or informational in nature. It flips materialism completely upside down.
Also,
It says consciousness isn't generated by matter. Rather, matter is just what consciousness looks like from the outside. Matter emerges from deeper informational mental structures. The universe is more like a great thought than a great machine.
and this is where the theology spectacularly collides with the physics. Because if we look at the Christian text describing Jesus, there's a very specific, deeply philosophical term used to describe his identity: the Logos.
Yes, the Logos.
The book of John famously opens with, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made." The Greek term translated as word is logos.
Right.
But logos doesn't just mean a spoken syllable. It means reason, order, principle, or information.
Yes. In ancient Greek philosophy, the Logos is the divine organizing principle of the cosmos. It is the rational structure that gives the universe its form and its meaning.
So if we operate under the framework of idealism, the idea that the universe is ultimately made of pure information and consciousness, and we look at Jesus as the incarnation of the Logos, the literal foundational source code of the universe.
How does that change our view of his miracles? Was he basically just using admin privileges to hack reality?
I like the direction of that analogy, but we actually need to refine it a bit.
Okay, refine it.
Admin privileges, or hacking, implies that you are logging into an external system or fighting against a security protocol to force the computer to do something it doesn't want to do. It implies friction.
Right, like you're breaking in.
Exactly. But if idealism is true, and the universe is fundamentally informational, then the Logos isn't hacking an external computer. The Logos is the operating system.
Oh, I see.
An extraordinary consciousness that is perfectly, seamlessly aligned with the divine wouldn't be fighting physics to create a miracle. They wouldn't be straining, sweating, and doing psychic weightlifting to force water to turn into wine.
They aren't trying to bend the spoon with mental exertion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because there is no separate, purely physical spoon to fight against. The physical laws we experience, gravity, thermodynamics, chemistry, are really just the deep habits of the universe's informational structure.
The habits of the cosmic mind. Yes, they are the stable patterns of the cosmic mind. If Jesus is the Logos, the author of that information, then interacting with the physical world is just interacting with himself.
Wow.
The miracles are interventions by God through a conduit of perfect alignment. The Logos doesn't break the code. He simply commands a new line of code to execute. He introduces a higher, deeper nature that supersedes the local habit of physics.
That completely changes the paradigm of a miracle. A miracle isn't a violation of nature. It is the manifestation of a deeper nature. It is the system remembering its absolute original intent.
Well said.
But this realization brings us to a massive existential pivot point in our deep dive. Wait, if Jesus altering reality is just him changing the universe's source code because consciousness is fundamental, does that mean my consciousness, my everyday choices, my internal state, my emotions are also interacting with that code.
That is the big question.
If mind and matter are intertwined at the absolute base level of reality, then morality can't just be a psychological construct. Are we saying morality is literally a physics equation?
That is the inescapable, profound, logical consequence of this framework. If the universe is fundamentally mental, and if consciousness and reality are structurally linked, then ethics and physics must inevitably intersect.
They have to.
Our internal states must have a structural, physical impact on the universe itself.
Which perfectly bridges us into the physics of morality. Because when you look at the source texts, Jesus' ultimate currency, the absolute core of his message, was love.
Loving God, loving your neighbor, and most radically, loving your enemies.
Right. In a traditional materialist view, love is just a warm, fuzzy emotion. It's a neurochemical cocktail of oxytocin in our primate brains designed to promote survival and social bonding.
An evolutionary trick.
Exactly. But in this theological and quantum view, love is framed as something vastly more structural. It is literally described as the nature of God.
To understand how love functions as a physical mechanism, we have to look at the groundbreaking work of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Okay, who is he?
He was a fascinating historical figure, both a Jesuit priest and a trained paleontologist. He spent his life staring at ancient fossils while also contemplating theology.
That is a unique combination.
It really is. And he looked at the deep, entire history of the universe, from the exact moment of the Big Bang to the formation of stars, planets, biological life, and eventually human consciousness.
And what did he find?
As he mapped this history, he observed a clear, undeniable trajectory. The universe is constantly moving toward greater complexity and greater unity.
Like things are always clumping together into more complicated things.
Exactly. Subatomic particles united to form atoms. Atoms united to form complex molecules. Molecules formed cells. Cells formed multicellular organisms. Organisms formed complex nervous systems, leading to conscious humans.
Who then formed highly complex, interconnected societies.
Yes. Teilhard called this expanding sphere of human thought and connection the noosphere.
So he saw evolution not just as random biological mutation, but as a directed cosmic force.
Yes, and he hypothesized that there is a fundamental driving force behind all of this cosmic evolution, pulling everything toward a point of ultimate complexity and divine unity, which he called the omega point.
Okay.
He identified that cohesive driving force as love.
So he is treating love not as a fleeting human feeling, but as an actual law of physics.
Yeah.
It's the emotional equivalent of gravity.
Exactly. Look at the metaphysical equation being proposed here. Love equals integration, harmony, and connection. Love is the force that binds, and the ultimate cohesive glue of the multidimensional universe.
And conversely, hate, selfishness, and isolation equal fragmentation and separation.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean when we translate it into the language of physics? It draws a brilliant parallel with the concept of entropy.
Oh, the second law of thermodynamics.
Right. For those who might need a quick refresher, entropy is the second law of thermodynamics. It is the undeniable tendency of all closed systems to move from a state of order to a state of disorder, from structure to chaos.
Things break down.
Exactly. If you build a pristine sandcastle and leave it alone, the wind and waves will eventually reduce it to a flat pile of sand. If you drop a ceramic cup on a tile floor, it shatters into 100 pieces.
And you can't unshatter the cup.
Right. Entropy is the arrow of time dragging everything toward decay.
And within this metaphysical framework, love is the specific force combating entropy. It is negentropy, negative entropy. It builds order. It forms complex relationships. It heals the shattered cup.
Wow.
Hate, selfishness, and isolation, on the other hand, accelerate entropy. They break the system down and isolate the components.
Which completely revolutionizes how we need to understand the concept of sin. Because I think when a lot of people listening hear the word sin, they immediately think of an arbitrary ledger.
A cosmic rulebook.
Yeah, they imagine a list of rules and a strict, angry deity in the sky acting like a hall monitor. You broke rule number 4, you had a bad thought, so you get a demerit on your permanent record.
But that is not what the text actually says.
No. The literal translation of the word sin in ancient Greek theology is hamartia. It is an archery term. It literally means missing the mark or missing the target.
Yes, hamartia. It implies a failure to hit the intended structural goal. So if we translate that philosophical concept into our modern metaphysical physics, sin isn't about angering a hall monitor.
No.
Sin is interpreted as a literal structural disconnection from divine reality. It is a misalignment with the fundamental structure of goodness and integration.
So sin is literally an act of introducing entropy into a highly ordered system. It's like throwing a wrench into the gears of the universe.
It's a great visual.
When you act out of deep selfishness or malice, you aren't just breaking a moral rule, you are physically tearing at the fabric of the noosphere. You are increasing the chaos of the cosmos.
This raises an important question about how we view the very nature of evil and darkness, because religious traditions constantly frame existence as this epic dualistic battle.
Light versus darkness, good versus evil.
Right? God representing creative order, and some demonic force representing disorder or rebellion. It makes it sound like a war between two equal, competing superpowers.
But the physics metaphor gives us a really important, profound clarification about what evil or darkness actually is on an ontological level.
Right, because it prevents us from falling into that trap of dualism. Evil is not an equal and opposite energy source to good. It doesn't have its own substance.
Exactly.
This aligns with the theology of St. Augustine, who argued that evil is merely a privation of good. Think about literal physical darkness. Darkness isn't a thing.
You can't capture a box of darkness.
No, you can't build a flashlight that projects a beam of dark light into a room to make it darker. Darkness is purely simply the absence of photons. It is the absence of light.
Right. And in the same way, cold does not exist as a physical substance. Cold is just the absence of molecular heat.
Exactly. So evil is parasitic. It relies entirely on the existence of a good structure in order to corrupt it or hollow it out.
A lie only has power because the concept of truth exists. A cancer only exists by corrupting healthy cells.
Yes. So when we talk about sin driving us away from God, the physical explanation is that sin is a chosen state of isolation. It is a self-imposed fragmentation away from the coherent source of all reality. It is choosing the cold. It is choosing the darkness.
And this brings us to a really crucial, emotionally heavy part of our deep dive, because if love is integration and sin is fragmentation and entropy, where does suffering fit into this multidimensional physics model?
It's a necessary question.
Our world is absolutely overflowing with suffering. How does this structural framework handle pain? The sources outline a profound, vital distinction between two fundamentally different types of sacrifice. There is positive sacrifice, which is when you offer your own sacrifice, and there is negative sacrifice, which is when you offer other people's sacrifice to appease the system.
This is perhaps the most practical, real-world application of everything we have discussed today.
Yeah.
It maps perfectly onto our concepts of love as coherence versus sin as entropy.
Let's break that down.
Let's look at positive sacrifice first. What happens when you voluntarily take on suffering for the sake of someone else? When a parent goes hungry so their child can eat, or when someone sacrifices their own comfort, resources, or even their own life out of love?
Right.
In this metaphysical framework, positive voluntary sacrifice is an act of ultimate cosmic integration.
You are acting as the connective tissue. You are stepping into the chaos, and you are willingly absorbing the entropy of the world so that the system around you doesn't break down. You are taking the hit.
Precisely. You are absorbing the fragmentation and neutralizing it with your own coherence. You are mimicking the divine nature.
Wow.
In Christian theology, this is the ultimate central meaning of the Logos on the cross. The crucifixion is the supreme act of absorbing cosmic fragmentation. All the hate, violence, and entropy of humanity, and answering it with absolute love and coherence.
It defeats entropy not by fighting it with a bigger weapon, but by subsuming it in love.
Exactly. That is positive sacrifice. It heals the very fabric of reality.
But then you have the dark inverse of that, negative sacrifice. This is the attempt to achieve order by imposing entropy on someone else.
Yes.
This is when human beings try to appease the universe or the gods or just their own massive egos by sacrificing others. We see it in ancient history with literal human sacrifices on altars, but we also see it every single day in modern systemic oppression.
Oh, constantly.
It is crushing the vulnerable, exploiting the poor, or destroying an outgroup to maintain the wealth, comfort, and false peace of the powerful in-group.
That is the ultimate manifestation of sin as fragmentation. It is an illusion of coherence built on actual destruction. It takes the life force, the energy, and the dignity of another and violently destroys it to feed one's own isolation and power.
It is the exact opposite of the Logos.
It's the deepest possible form of missing the mark because it generates massive amounts of entropy while pretending to create order.
That is so powerful. Positive sacrifice is choosing to bleed yourself to keep the universe connected. Negative sacrifice is choosing to make others bleed so you can stand alone, safe at the top of the wreckage.
One is the physics of love. The other is the literal physics of hell.
It shows that our daily choices about how we handle suffering and power are not just abstract ethical dilemmas. They are literal participations in the fundamental physical direction of the cosmos.
Beautifully said.
Okay, we have gone incredibly deep here. We have spent an hour wandering through the dense, mind-bending weeds of 11-dimensional string theory, the frozen block of space-time, the quantum double-slit experiment, the foundational source code of the Logos, and the literal cosmic physics of love, sin, and sacrifice.
We've covered a lot of ground.
It is exhilarating to connect all these dots, but before we wrap up, we need a grounding anchor.
Yes, it is very easy to get so swept up in the elegance of the theoretical physics and the grand extrapolations that we lose sight of the text itself. We have to maintain our intellectual honesty.
Right. We have to look at what the original source material traditional Christianity actually claims about all of this, because despite all this brilliant modern speculation and multidimensional math we've just discussed, the traditional Christian explanation for Jesus' miracles is much, much simpler.
It is. It doesn't rely on physics at all.
It doesn't. The traditional theological view does not invoke quantum wave collapse or string theory brains. It simply states that Jesus performs miracles because he is the Son of God, acting through direct divine power.
The miracles are signs. They are primarily relational and authoritative. They are validations of his identity and his message of restoration.
They emphasize that miracles are not demonstrations of hidden physical laws or a masterclass in advanced personal mental energy manipulation. Jesus wasn't a really good quantum physicist who figured out the cheat codes to the Matrix.
Exactly. The traditional theology insists on the authority of the actor, not the mechanism of the action.
So how should we balance these two views? I mean, for you listening, we've just spent this entire deep dive building this beautiful, intricate scientific framework that seems to make sense of everything in a modern context. Do the quantum theories invalidate the traditional view?
What's fascinating here is that they do not have to be in conflict at all, provided we understand the limits of each lens.
Okay.
These scientific theories are modern frameworks to help us understand. They are our way of grappling with the profound, but they are not replacements for the theological meaning.
So they serve different purposes.
Think of it this way. The traditional theological view answers the who and the why. Who is doing this? The Creator. Why? To show divine authority, to demonstrate love, and to bring restoration to a broken world.
And the multidimensional physics models are just us, with our modern tools and our mathematical equations, trying to catch a fleeting glimpse of the how.
Precisely. The physics theories are our attempt to map the mechanism of the miracle. But knowing exactly how a combustion engine works, understanding the thermodynamics, the spark plugs, the fuel injection, doesn't invalidate the fact that the driver is the one actually choosing where the car goes.
Right.
Understanding the potential multidimensional physics of a miracle doesn't diminish the divine authority behind it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, for many physicists and theologians alike, it magnifies the awe. It shows that the divine isn't arbitrary or chaotic. It is supremely, infinitely, beautifully ordered.
It's like we finally found a telescope powerful enough to see the microscopic brushstrokes on a masterpiece painting. And instead of the telescope ruining the painting by reducing it to mere dollops of paint, it just makes us respect the genius of the artist infinitely more.
The science provides the vocabulary, but the tradition provides the meaning.
That is the perfect way to encapsulate it. There are two different lenses looking at the exact same light. What an incredible journey this has been. Let's just take a breath and recap where we've been, because we have covered a staggering amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at how the mysterious claim, "My kingdom is not of this world," maps beautifully onto the complex mathematics of 11-dimensional string theory and M theory.
Suggesting an architecture where unseen divine realms could mathematically overlap our own.
We then moved from the geometry of space to the geometry of time, using Einstein's theory of special relativity and time dilation to understand the block universe model.
This allowed us to conceptualize how a being outside of space-time could exist in the eternal present, holding the entire film reel of history to fulfill the definitions of omniscience and omnipresence.
From there, we dove into the microscopic foundations of reality, looking at the weirdness of the quantum observer effect, the hard problem of consciousness, panpsychism, and idealism.
We saw how consciousness might be the bedrock of the universe, and how Jesus, as the Logos, wouldn't be fighting physics to perform miracles, but would be directly executing the fundamental informational source code of reality.
And finally, we translated these cosmic mechanics into the deeply human, everyday experiences of morality. We explored Teilhard de Chardin's vision of evolutionary love as the ultimate force of cosmic coherence.
While defining sin and evil as literal forces of entropy, fragmentation, and darkness. A darkness that is not an opposing power in itself, but merely the tragic absence of the light.
And we grounded all of that in the profound, vital difference between the positive sacrifice that absorbs entropy to heal the universe and the negative sacrifice that violently shatters it to maintain power, always keeping the traditional theological meaning as our ultimate anchor.
It has been a true masterclass in seeing the universe through dual lenses simultaneously.
It challenges us to stop compartmentalizing our knowledge, to start keeping our science and our spirituality in separate hostile buckets, and start looking for the grand unifications.
Yeah, that's the real takeaway here.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive. We started today talking about massive concepts, cosmology, quantum mechanics, the very edges of human understanding. It can feel incredibly abstract.
Very abstract.
But if everything we've explored today holds even a fraction of truth, if idealism is right and consciousness really is the bedrock of reality, and if Teilhard de Chardin was right that love is the literal organizing physical principle of the cosmos, then think about your everyday life. Think about the seemingly insignificant small choices you make on a Tuesday afternoon. Every single time you choose empathy over selfishness, every time you choose to forgive instead of retaliate, every time you make a small positive sacrifice of your time or comfort for someone else, you aren't just being a good person.
No, it's so much bigger than that.
You aren't just following a moral rule book to keep the cosmic hall monitor happy. If this framework is true, you might literally, physically, be holding the fabric of the multidimensional universe together.
You are actively fighting the entropy of the cosmos.
Your love is the gravity keeping reality from spinning apart. Thank you so much for taking this incredible deep dive with us. Keep questioning the nature of reality, keep exploring the overlaps, and we will catch you on the next one.